everyone. I'm here with Leanne Richardson today from Sober City, Halifax, and as a fellow East Coaster, I have what seems to be quite a lot in common with her, including sobriety. So, Leanne, thanks for being here, and yeah, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and more about Sober City, Halifax.
Sure, yeah. Well, first off, I started as a YouTuber. My YouTube channel is Addicted to Happy, and then from that, I decided, okay, I want to focus more on my community here in Halifax, or really Nova Scotia. So I decided to start Sober City Halifax, which is more of a blog / community. Right now, I only just launched in January. But basically, Sober City is a place to go for resources, information, inspiration on where to go, what to do, what for the newly sober, for the sober curious, or those who just dabble in alcohol-free life. So it's basically for anybody. I just wanted to create that community of people where they feel safe, because some people don't feel okay going to 12-step groups. So I was like, well, this is an alternative. So that's pretty much it. I'm 6 years sober as well. I thought I would add that in too. So
amazing, amazing. Wow. And so when did you start Sober City?
Well, official launch was January 1st on New Year's Day. But I had been thinking about it for a while, since November, really, is when it started, because I actually went to an event where, you buy your ticket to the event, and then you also get a drink ticket, which is normal. But I was like, oh, well, that's fine. I'll just get a non-alcoholic beverage. So I go up to the bar, and this was an award show for basically different resources and places around my city. So I had no problem. And they were like, no, it's only for this one cocktail. You're not allowed to have sober beverages. So in my head, I was like, just you wait. I'm going to make something for Halifax, and you're going to regret not having that option for sober people. So that's what it was.
Oh my goodness, it's amazing. And honestly, I feel like there's a lot of sway, a lot of like push toward that side of things now. I don't know if it's just because I'm here in Toronto, and a lot of restaurants are now starting to become a little bit more like meal restriction friendly, or like food restrictions, allergies, that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of, obviously, going along with that, like the hipster kind of vibe is still there, but now you can get kombucha on tap, and now you can get a bunch of other like non-alcoholic mocktails on tap. So yeah, I really like that that's actually happening with our society in general. And it's nice to know that it's not just here in Toronto either, and that it's happening on the East Coast.
Yep.
I do find that the East Coast is a bit more slow to catch on to things.
Exactly.
It's like my whole life. But yeah, so I feel like that's like an amazing feat for you so far. And I actually know Leanne. For everyone listening out there, I know Leanne because she is a friend of a good friend of mine, and also we connected because I wrote a mindfulness book. And so Leanne would email me back and forth, even though she was on the launch team and helping me, launch the whole book and promotions and all that. But also she would just email me and be like, hey, I did this exercise in your book, and I'm like having trouble here. Or like would just like send me emails and be like, hey, like good for you, like I'm excited to read it. And so we kind of became friends, right? And it's an amazing thing now. So
I knew it would happen too.
Thanks for being part of that. Sorry, what'd you say?
I knew it would happen too. Like as soon as I learned of our similarities, I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna be friends someday. I'll just wait it out. So
100%.
Yeah.
And so I've been sober maybe the better part of like a little, maybe 2.5 years now, a little less than 2.5. And life has been going really well for me. I wrote a book, which is something that was on my bucket list, kind of like way down there, almost near the like dream section that will never come true kind of thing. So yeah, I really appreciate your help, Leanne, with all the book launch and promotional tools. And yeah, tell me what you thought about the book.
Yeah, so, well, I read it over basically over a weekend or over a long weekend, because it's a quick read. And I've told you this before. It was quick, but it's not just full of filler. It's like actually good, solid information throughout. So it was, I guess, a colorful read rather than like, okay, this is boring. And I went back a few times to read other sections too. And I think it's one of those books too where, and I'll get you to fill us in more on the book itself. But I found I think it's one of those books where you should always keep on your bookshelf because you're going to want to keep going back to it, just for like the fundamentals, I guess, of mindfulness, and just for other inspiration on, I guess, techniques and ways to practice it, I suppose. So yeah, I love it. I have the Kindle version. I'm going to end up getting the actual real version because I want to feel it and touch it. Nice. And highlight it and stuff like that. But yeah, so a drink called Mindfulness. Give us a taste of what that's all about.
Yeah. Thank you for that, by the way. That's an amazing kind of introduction to what you thought of the book. And so yeah, I had the idea of this title called A Drink Called Mindfulness. And that didn't come till almost I had written the whole book already before it was originally supposed to be called Get Woke. And I had a bit of, I guess, hesitations with with using those words and that phrase, just because it's like so, like kind of like commonly used now. And I didn't want it to I wanted to kind of keep mindfulness modern, but at the same time still let people know that this is like something that has lasted throughout the ages, you know. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry,
I didn't know that. That's interesting, but good choice, because that wouldn't quite be timeless.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And you know, the essence of the book is that people are awakening, you know, that people are kind of waking up to their souls and their selves, and following their inner truths and doing the deep work that involves going forward with that. And I so love that about the place and moment in time that we are in the world. So yes, it's about awakening, but I wrote it so that it would be more applicable to, I guess, somebody who is like mindful, kind of looking for something that's more mindful and how to integrate that into their everyday. And I really wanted to emphasize that mindfulness isn't the kind of formal meditation, sitting down, lying down, doing body scans all the time, you know, in silence. It's not about that, and I don't think that is beneficial to our society right now, at least not our generation, because millennials, we are on the go, we're constantly moving, we're constantly working for the most part. And so if something doesn't work for us, it's not going to serve us properly, right? So the book is riddled with small exercises here and there that are supposed to be only 5 minutes long, that you can read anytime at any point. You can kind of just like what Leanne said, just kind of like open it up and do the practice from that section. And that was really my goal, to get people more in the process and in the practice of just checking in with themselves. And at that point, if they do need a guide or need some help, need a resource, then they can open up the book and do the practice. The book in itself is great as a read, even if you don't do the practices. Yeah. Obviously, it'll be way more enhanced with that. But yeah, I had a lot of fun writing the book, and originally it was actually going to be a memoir as well, and not so much a self-help book and a guide. But it evolved into, you know, into me realizing that I really used a lot of mindfulness when I was growing up, and I almost didn't know that it was mindfulness, right? And so I found a way to fit it into, you know, my varsity athletic career and my academic career, and coping with losing a parent and grieving that loss and going through a huge depression, which spiraled me into alcoholism, you know, and getting out of that. I really used a lot of mindfulness practices within that time period in my life, but I had no idea until now that I look back and I use, you know, I see it in 2020, I see it in hindsight that wow, okay, I actually have developed all these skills for myself. And I also want to mention that I didn't actually make up any sort of method that is like my own. I just put in the book what I have used, and those are practices that have been, you know, time and time again proven to be really good practices for just keeping yourself more self-aware, for keeping your cognition high, for keeping your productivity high, but also in those days when you feel really down and that you can't get out of bed or can't leave the house, there are practices in it for those days as well. And we have to honor ourselves in whatever stage we are in. And it changes day by day, moment by moment. So yeah, I really had a great time with the book. I'm really glad, Leanne, that you found it useful. And I guess the purpose of our chat together today is to be, yes, like going to be talking about some mindfulness practices, but also reiterate to a sober audience, but also audiences that aren't sober, that, you know, there are a lot of ways to help you get through tough times without always having to turn to that crutch of alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's funny, as you're saying that you were employing it without even realizing it when you were growing up. And then I was looking back at my own life, and I remember I used to do, I guess it probably was mindfulness techniques. I used to do that a lot when I was a kid and when I was a teenager, but I saw it as more of ways to like trip myself out, because it would be like almost an existential mini crisis. Whenever I would like pay attention to my surroundings and like see that people were looking at me, talking with me, and I was talking back, and I was part of the world. I was a human. So whenever I would start to think like that, I would get into like a weird headspace, and then it would all come to me, and it would freak me out, but not in a bad way, in just a quiet, thoughtful way. Mm-hmm. But really, that really was mindfulness. But for some reason, I just took it to a weird paranormal level almost.
We're all witches to some extent.
True.
True say. Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, Leanne, too, because I feel like it's something that we could have really learned from if we did almost formalize it a little bit more, or maybe our parents' generation said, you know, oh, this is what you do when you're in a stressful situation, or these are some breathing techniques you can use when you can't make a decision in the moment. You know, there are so many things that I think we were lacking as children and as teenagers, and maybe even now, that we're starting to find, and also a lot of things that we're unlearning. You know, those limiting beliefs, those limiting thought patterns that we feel so ingrained in, that are so unconscious that we don't even know it. Again, so I said in the book, actually, it's like basically you spend like 15 years of your life just like, okay, experiencing the world, and then like the next 15 years of them are unpacking all the stuff that you thought was correct.
Yeah. And some people don't ever do that their whole life. So it's pretty awesome when you get it, and when other people, you know, start to see it that way and really try to make some changes and change as a human. And I don't want to use the word evolve, because then that would imply that you're getting better and your past self wasn't as good. I don't mean that. It's just changing, growing up, I guess, in a way. And I mean, for me, it makes my life more enriched. And I was like, as you're talking about it and how you incorporate it into your life to make you more self-aware and all those good things. When I was in active addiction, I remember specifically making sure that I did the complete opposite of being mindful. And those were my coping mechanisms. Like the only coping mechanisms I had was, of course, alcohol. That's the easy one. denial and blocking things out, and disassociating, really. And I still struggle with that now. I'm 6 years sober, and I'm seeing a therapist, and what triggered me to go there is that I disassociate so quickly. But I can't judge it. It's just something that I've learned over my life, that's just what I do when I feel almost anything. I'm getting better now, but anyway, yeah, it's just interesting that I made sure I wasn't mindful back in active addiction, because I knew that that's when things got real, and I didn't want things to get real. I wanted things to be happy and cool and funny and great. And then the only way to do that is when you get drunk, because that's the only way people like you, is what my mind thought back then. So yeah. And now, of course, when I do more mindfulness stuff, which is pretty much every day, then you're right. It does bring good perspective and self-awareness, and it brings a calm. Whereas before, I would have thought it did the opposite. It probably would have done the opposite, because I wasn't ready, or, I didn't have the skills in place to know how to work through my thoughts and feelings. But now I do. And now it's a good thing to have and to practice.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's something that's really necessary, in both you and I think we value the authenticity, just being super real and not beating around the bush, of like the struggles that we've had in life. It's not always easy, and it's not always like apparent or apparent solution in front of us, but we just have to do it anyway, because I once heard this amazing adage, and it's the only negative emotion is the one that's not expressed. And so we tend to think that, our negative emotions, or the things that we think are negative, like anger, resentment, jealousy, addiction, or, feeling that hunger for something, craving something, we tend to think that those are always bad things. But sometimes it needs to come out. Sometimes it needs to be expressed, or else it comes out in other ways, like, alcohol or drug addiction or sex addiction or anything. I'm like constantly amazed at the observance of people and behavior, and learning more and more every day about what makes people do the things they do.
Yeah, and a lot of the times we don't even really know why we're doing the things we're doing. Because so many years have passed doing the same thing over and over again, and then getting layered upon layered of other stuff that happens, and then you forget, or you don't even forget, like the root cause is so lost in the years and years of shit on top of it, that it takes a lot of work and dedication to sort through and find the root of these things. And once you do, oh my God, the clarity is amazing. And it's sort of addictive, really. It's awesome.
Yeah, totally. I thank you also for like adding that in, because it's so real that you go for years and years and don't know that it's even just become such a habit, and that's why it's so hard for people to form new habits and to change. And that's why it's so important also to really find meaning in the things that enable you to create that change, right? So whatever it is you're doing. And I mean, for a long time, when I was trying to quit drinking, I went like a year of binge drinking, and then I would go like a year of no drinking, total sobriety. And then I'd be like, oh, it's my birthday, I'll just treat myself or whatever. And that's kind of how the cycle kept restarting. And I tried to always just like rebuild it somehow, but I didn't know any other way. So I rebuilt the same way, so I just hopped on that train every time. And it's really difficult to be like, yeah, I've changed, and then in the same breath, like, have no other way to turn except the way that right? So yeah, it's not easy. It takes a village, for sure.
Oh yeah, totally. Like a support system, that's like always the number one thing that I tell people when they are thinking about quitting drinking, or they want to just stop for a while, see what it's like, or whatever. I'm like, support system, you need that immediately. and even if it's not humans in real life, maybe it's humans on the internet. Like it's fine. Like, you know, that's the minimum. You can find a support system, and it's so important. You can't really do it alone.
It's so true. And yeah, I mean, I've called into your Zoom chats now that it's available online with Sober City Halifax, and it's such a strong community there. So like props to you for creating that out of nothing, you know, just literally out of nothing, and with things, with society seemingly against you, you know, everywhere you go being given a drink ticket or whatever else. So it takes a lot. Yeah. And sorry, yeah, go ahead if you had anything else to add.
I was just gonna I guess just add to that yeah, it feels like especially like restaurants and things, that's what's on my mind now, is that they're against us because they don't put non-alcoholic beverages on their menus for the most part. Yes. And just like little things like that people don't really think of, and I'm sure they don't do it maliciously, but it's just not something they think of doing. But I'm like, you guys, if you did that, then you know, there's a lot of us out here, like, we have money, we want to spend it at your establishments, please. So anyway, yeah, it feels like working against a stream, especially
100%. Yeah, and I mean, we are the generation that kind of created that that like vote with your dollar kind of mentality. So we can do it if we really try. Not to like change the topic a little bit, but I wanted to bring up what something you and I had talked about before, Leanne, is that is around 14 years old, we both had like some sort of developmental shift. Like obviously we went through puberty, but like some sort of other kind of like shift that happened in our early teenage years. So tell everyone what changed for you at that point.
I don't even know. I just know that age 13 and 14 was the most intense, probably, other than age 21. And I don't know why. I've like, there's so many big things happened, and I'm still not able to figure out exactly what it was. And I'm sure it's just a combination of extreme hormones combined with a bit of an eating disorder and starting to drink a little bit. That sort of came into it. And yeah, usually around that age, especially growing up in Dartmouth, that's just what happens here. And the school I was going to and the friends I was hanging out with, that's just what we did. And smoking weed, of course, like around that age of 14. And lost my virginity 14, did all this was starting to just be completely out of control. And yeah, like I said, nothing really triggered it so much. Like I had a pretty good home life, but for some reason, I don't know what it was, but just everything all at once. And I remember feeling every emotion in the world, it seemed like, at 10 maximum all the time. And it was so intense that, and I think at that time too, self-harm got a little bad too. But really, I think that when that started I was around 10 or 11, but around 14 is when it really amped up because I had so much stuff happening in my mind and in my body. Like it was so intense that I just needed to make it all stop and go away. So that was soothing technique. Alcohol and self-harm were both soothing techniques. So even right from back then, I had really no good coping mechanisms. Those were my only two ones, was to drink poison or harm myself in some physical way. It's crazy when I think back on it. Like I didn't really have many resources, or I didn't know what to do. It's crazy. But you said you also around and coming out too, around 13 or 14 is when I realized, like, okay, yeah, there's something to these girls. So so, and I mean, I know it's easier to come out as a bisexual woman rather than a lesbian or than a gay man. So, and I don't want to compare, but I didn't feel it was that big of a deal for me, but it was still something that I was contemplating and sort of struggling with. But yeah, for you around 13, 14, what, do you have sort of the same craziness happening that age?
Yeah, I think, like, first of all, coming out as bisexual is no harder than anything else. Your experience is your experience.
You're right.
But thank you for sharing that. And also, yeah, I think like when you're 13, 14, you do go through so many changes and you have no idea what your body's doing. You have no idea what your thoughts are doing, what your mind is going, like where your mind is going. You know, it's just like everything is everywhere. And that confusion, I think, continues throughout your teens and probably in your 20s too. And it's like really difficult to say that, you know, you're having an identity crisis or whatever else, because like maybe that's just the part in your life where you do start to come up with struggles, you know, like real physical and mental struggles in your life. So yeah, when I was 13 and I grew up in Newfoundland in a really small town, so I didn't really have like any queer role models or anything like that. I didn't have RuPaul on television, you know, it wasn't like that at that time. The most I had was the L Word when they first came out, and I had to watch it like in my basement when my parents fell asleep because that was the only way. Yeah. So yeah, I mean those were good times and also terrifying times because as a 13-year-old, you don't know that your parents are going to love you anyway, or that your family is going to love you anyway, or that your community is going to accept you the way that you are, with no questions asked, you know. But it wasn't like that, you know, in my head for sure. And so I think maybe that's kind of where stuff starts to happen, where, you know, like what you said, Leanne, about really like, I don't have any coping mechanisms. I'll just turn to this drink, you know, or I'll turn to this smoke or whatever it is because everyone else is also doing it, you know. The one saving grace I had was that I have a huge family. And so my oldest sister is almost old enough to be my mom. So I actually came out to her. She was one of the first people I came out to besides my like friend circle, who obviously knew first because friends first, right, when you're 13. But yeah, so I came up to her and she really helped my parents understand, you know, that having a gay child or a queer child or a transgender child isn't, you know, anything to be ashamed of or guilty of or uncomfortable with, right? And I say those things, I don't have the experience of, you know, growing up as transgender or the experience of like a man going through that, so I don't know. But yeah, it was a lot for me at the time as a cis woman to just be like going through all that and like, you know, also noticing other cis women and being like, what is going on here? And so yeah, anyway, the one saving grace was that my family was pretty good about it after all, like, but I made sure I didn't come out to my parents until I already had moved out because they were pretty strict and I didn't know what they were going to do, you know, if they were going to take away some privileges that I had because I still lived under their roof. And yeah, and I didn't really have like the closest relationship with like the tightest, and I mean that in like a really like open, communicative kind of way. Like I think my parents were loving and they did their best, right? But their generational differences from mine were just too far. And so it was like they didn't know how to have that like sex talk with me, or they didn't know how to talk about, you know, oh, some girls like girls, and that was never a thing that was just said in the open in our family. So yeah, I think your teenage years are really crucial. Your early teenage years are really, really, really tough and an important time to have some sort of relationship with someone that's older than you that you see as like a parent, if it's not your actual parents. And yeah, having that time, I think, and going through all that, I would never wish that on anyone. And I had it a lot better than most, I think. Like, you know, I didn't get kicked out of my home or anything like that, and I didn't get cut off financially or anything, which was like the huge fear back then for me. So yeah, looking back on it, it wasn't all that bad, but I definitely compensated, right? As a teen, I was one of those people that was a goody two shoes, but also was like kind of always like dabbling in things and never getting my foot really totally immersed in the other side of things like drugs or alcohol. But it was probably because of that I turned the opposite when I moved out finally from my hometown and went to university, and I just went bonkers. And that was when I really started binge drinking and getting into other drugs and smoking and whatever else, because it was something that I never got a chance to do otherwise. And I was, I didn't have exposure to it, or it was a weird time when I was growing up. So basically what I'm trying to say is that I went the other way, and then I spent most of my 20s kind of picking up those pieces.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, like once you like escaped and you're free, and then you like do all the things you want to experience, all the things. I didn't have that. It was just slow going, and I have always had that personality of, I don't just want to like dabble and like see what it's like. I want to go the most extreme into it, to really fully understand what it all is, with reckless abandon. But I mean, that didn't happen until I was about 21. And then my 20s were just insane. But teenage years, I was definitely amping up to that. But my mom, I grew up with, my mom and my stepdad. And my mom, she's a nurse. So she was great with having, body talks, sex talks, sexuality talks with me. Because her best friend growing up is a gay man, and he's basically like my dad. So I always had him as a role model. So I knew, and she had some lesbian friends. So I always knew, that gay people exist, and they're really cool, and they like me, and I like them. So thankfully I had that. But I was still, of course, scared and worried, and yeah, there was some weirdness when I told some family members, but I'm like, whatever, that's to be expected. But anyway, yeah, Mom, with also telling me about drugs and giving me drug talks, I was sort of scared about really anything. So that's why I didn't really do much other than like smoked some weed when I was like 14, and drank. But then it was 21 when I was like, okay, now I can do a bunch of drugs and see what that's really like, and I want to get addicted. And I didn't know this. One of my best friends told me like a couple of years ago. She's like, Leanne, do you remember when you started smoking cigarettes? I was about 13 or 14. Do you remember saying that you wanted to get addicted? That's why you were smoking? It's like, I don't remember that. Sounds like something I'd say though. So that's just it. I want to do something so that I get the most extreme form of it. So don't know why, but that was just my personality.
That's the thing. And I mean, it's it's like hard to tell the difference between like what is balance, what is balance, because we don't see any of that. We don't have any, speaking of role models, we really don't have any sort of balance in our world. There's like so many things that we're just constantly being shown to go to excess, like to strive for that next level, when really it's almost like a pandemic in perfectionism. Really, it's hard to like think of something and just being like, okay, I like this car because it has a dent in the side. We would never say that. That's where like mindfulness comes in. I think it's really like learning how to just, like, we use the word cope a lot in the past like 10 minutes or so. It's like hard to use it now in the sense of like finding balance, because like coping almost has like a negative connotation to it too, right? So it's like, where do you find like something that's within you, or within your homestead, or within your like social sphere, that feels like just right, and like Goldilocks, and not too hot, not too cold, like not too sober, not too addicted. Like, where do you find that? So I've found that in mindfulness, right? And I found that in taking a breather. I found that in nature for sure, to just like go outside and just be, just connect somehow. So, yeah, I guess we can talk about maybe the role of mindfulness in sobriety and keeping sober.
Yeah, in keeping sober. So that would be, well, really just bringing things back down to a level that's manageable. And you would do that through mindfulness techniques. Like the other day when, thankfully, when I quit drinking, my anxiety disorder was virtually cured for the most part. So I don't really experience that, but every once in a while I will start to feel panicked. And I noticed the other day, you know, I had too much screen time all day, and I was starting to feel disconnected to like my surroundings, really. Like it, you know, when you're looking at a computer for too long, you start to like, you got to snap out of it type deal. So, and then I did some mindfulness techniques where I just, you know, felt my body in the chair, listened to the sounds of my neighborhood and smelled things, looked out the window, and, you know, just took like a minute or two to just like hear myself breathing and see what that felt like in my body. And then I was like, okay, now I'm connected again. So, and I know well, especially in early sobriety or early recovery, there's a lot of chaotic, scary, sad moments when things come up, and you know, you just feel like, am I making the right decision? Is this like, you know, you can think of a million things. Like amygdala hijacking can happen where you attach onto a negative thought and your brain will just keep going with it, and then just like you're stuck in a trap. But bringing mindfulness techniques into it can bring you back, ground you, bring you back to like where you're at now, to stop that that crazy brain insanity from happening or from going any further. So that's extremely helpful in early recovery, and to just keep doing them. I mean, as you go on with sobriety and things get easier, because it really does get better with each year, to still remember that, because it's still the basics. It's still a human need to feel grounded and connected. So it's something that we'll always need as humans.
I love that. I love that. Also, it's like, I feel like mindfulness, for me, at least, is a way to find, like, like I said, balance, but also, so we talked about, you and I connected on this before, is like that anxiety that you get, you know, like after a night of drinking, you just get really anxious, you don't know what you're doing, and all these, you know, all the problems that were there yesterday before you got drunk come up again, but like times 20.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're like, oh no, I have to do the schoolwork, or I have this work to do, or I have this deadline to meet, or I have to call my mom, or whatever it is, I have to go to brunch. And it's it just stumps you in every regard. Right? So yeah, it's like, okay, when you're in that anxiety, what do you do? Like, what has helped you, man?
Oh man. See, like, not like, I'm only just learning how to get through that, because before I would just distract myself, or through it, and then it would be worse. But really, I'm still learning how to do that. So a lot of the times now, I'll distract myself, but in like in a healthy way. So like, you know, go outside and breathe, or you know, maybe look at whatever issue I'm facing in a more logical way to try to take the emotions out of it, which I'm not that great at yet, but I am able to do like here and there. And I mean, I guess technically that's a distraction too, getting yourself out of your feelings and more on the logical route, but it's the healthy way to do it. I can't think of any examples, but really, yeah, I would just try to look at it in a more of, still not in a judgmental way, but in a way of like, okay, like, it's not that, it's like with having to like call your grandmother is something that my mom always says, you got to call your grandmother. And sometimes it brings anxiety, because I'm like, oh my goodness, like I got to do this thing or whatever. But like, if you step back and you think about it, you're not going to, like, she's not going to be alive forever. So put things into perspective in that way. And I'm sure you could apply that in lots of different situations that you're in, to put things in perspective, and try to take the emotions and panic out of it, really.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I've always said that. I've always, when people say, "Oh, I can't meditate," it's like one of the hardest things. I just can't stop my brain from thinking. And I'm like, yeah, no, you can, and that's totally fine. But that's what meditation is learning that you can't stop it, and just to like be the observer, be like the second row, be like the person stepping back and saying, oh, like, here is this thought, and wow, I've been thinking a lot about that today, and oh, on days when I feel constipated, like these are the thoughts that I have, versus other days when I feel like healthy, and that's something that I go through. Sorry?
Is that the goal, right, of meditation, to be that observer? The goal isn't to be completely thoughtless, right? Like, that's the goal.
Right.
To be the observer.
Yeah, no, that's totally not the goal. Like, the goal isn't to like stop your thoughts and reach this place of blank nothingness. Like, that's not it at all. That's kind of the opposite. It's actually just being exactly here with you, with yourself, here and now, and thinking of yourself like, if you can almost, like, people have called it an out-of-body experience, or that you really just like take such a deep breath and you look back at yourself and you say, oh, okay, that's me there, and that's okay that I'm reacting that way or this way. And oh wow, I see how that could have hurt that person. Where if you're in the moment, you don't always see that, right? You don't always see like the bridges you're burning and all that, and that the root of your addiction or whatever else is really that you like have a lot of shame pent up in you, or a lot of guilt or anger or frustration. So I've learned through counseling, just some little techniques, but I think my favorite one, and I think Leanne also shares in this, is biophilia. So yeah, biophilia is something I talk about in my book, and it's basically your connection to nature. Like, everyone has this, right? I've never met one person that doesn't like a breath of fresh air, or like, doesn't like going swimming on a nice sunny day, or whatever it is. Like, there's not one single person in the world right now that doesn't like interacting with elements of earth. And that's a lot of my medicine. I do bring earth-based medicine and land-based medicine into it. So biophilia is really, really important. It's something that I've really felt I've been lacking here in Toronto, and it's because I don't have a car to get outside the city. And yeah, there are green spaces and parks and Lake Ontario within the city, but it's not the same as what I maybe grew up in and took for granted at that point.
Yeah, I felt the same way when I lived in Calgary. And because, like, the only bodies of water were man-made lakes, like up in Lake Chestermere, like, which was a drive outside. And sure, the mountains were there, but they were like way over there on the horizon. So like, it was just a concrete jungle. And I felt like I was missing that piece, but I didn't want to admit it to myself, because I was like, what? Like, I'm not some crazy hippie. Like, I don't need that. But no, I think it's a human need. And now that I'm back in Nova Scotia, and I have been for years, and luckily I got a car now. Over the past 3 years, I finally have a car where I can drive places. It's amazing. It's life-changing. But now I'm able to, go out somewhere, and I'm able to see the ocean if I look out my window over that way. It's amazing. And even just be outside in bare feet is huge. I got married in October, and it was always my goal. I never dreamt about a dream wedding. I wasn't one of those girls. But the one thing I needed to do when I got married was to get married barefoot. So I did, and it was outside. So I got to feel the earth and the grass. That was the most important aspect of it. So yeah, I love it. Yeah, nature.
Yay! That is amazing, and I really feel like, it's such a simple task, but I had to write it in a book for people to like take me seriously and like go out and do it, which is crazy. Because I recommended like every day to everybody, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that after my work." I'm like, "No, make you a priority, right?
Yeah.
Like make your own time a priority, even if it's 5 minutes, and then you can go do your 8 hours of work per day."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like touch a tree, touch water, or do something, like be there for just 5 minutes. It really does. It's like a reset of sorts.
It is.
If you go at it with those intentions. And even if you go at it without those intentions, it can still just happen anyway.
It just happens.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what mindfulness is. It's like, it's that boundary between, it's like creating a boundary between the things that you do, which is very useful because then you don't have things like bleeding into one another. And so instead of, like, I look at it as like, instead of going from point A to point B, I go from point A to point B to point C. So I find myself more productive because my point B is now my meditation practice or my mindful practice or my body scan or mindful eating. Whatever it is I'm doing, there's always something for me that replenishes my tank. And then I go to the next point quickly. Yeah,
a lot of people don't think of it to be that important. They just see it as a hindrance to their progress. But really, in the long run, it makes a lot more sense to incorporate those little flashes throughout your day or throughout the week if you can't make it every day. But yeah, it's super important. And it's, in the long run, it makes all the difference.
Precisely. We have a few minutes before we end. Leanne, did you want to mention anything else that we forgot to mention? I also want to give the listeners a chance to go follow your Instagram account and go like your YouTube page and all that. So let them know. Yeah, let us know how we can get a hold of you.
Yeah, and no, I think we touched on pretty much everything that I envisioned this talk would be. So that's great. Right now, I do, like I said, I do have my YouTube channel, Addicted to Happy, and I do have the blog, Sober City. At some point, I think I'll be starting a Sober City YouTube channel, but in the meantime, it's going to be separated. YouTube, Addicted to Happy. On Sober City, that's where most of my socials would be. So on Twitter, that would be at Sober City HFX for Halifax. Same handle on Instagram. On Facebook is where you'll find more of the community aspect, and that would be more geared towards people in Nova Scotia. Eventually, I will be expanding to other cities, but right now, since Sober City is so fresh and new, I'm just keeping it to Nova Scotia. But I mean, people from around the world are still very welcome to follow things because I do post, just general advice and things like that. So anybody can still find value in that. But on Facebook, it would be Sober City. And the private Facebook chat group would be Sober City Chat. And then that's where I would also do weekly Zoom meetings. Since we can't meet up in person right now, we'll do online meetings every week just to check in with my community. People drop in every once in a while and just to see what it's like and just hang out and chat with other sober people. But eventually we'll be doing more meetups in person and a whole bunch of other goals I have in mind for Sober City. But right now, that's where we're at. But yeah, so for you, how can people get a hold of you and see your stuff?
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. And for everybody like thinking about joining Sober City, the Facebook group, or even just going on the live weekly call that they do, I highly recommend. It's super useful to just connect with other people. And to feel really, to get more of a sense of like yourself, because you see yourself in other people, right? So surround yourself with the people that you want to be around and the person that you want to be. So thanks for that, Leanne. I really appreciate Silver City, Halifax. Praise.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so for listeners who are interested in reading this elusive book that I keep referring to, it's actually available on Amazon right now. It's both paperback and ebook versions. Just type in A Drink Called Mindfulness. The full title is A Drink Called Mindfulness, How to Go from Hot Mess to Self-Aware Before 30. So if that sounds like that's you, go ahead and check that out. I'm very active on Instagram. My Instagram handle is the Erin Edwards. My name is spelled with an E-R-I-N as well. So I'm sure we'll put it in the comments below here as well. But yeah, go check those out. I do every Monday a Make 5 Monday, which basically is a different way to say take 5. You know how like people say take 5 to take a break? But I don't want to take anyone's time. I want you to make your own time. So make 5 for, just make 5 minutes on Mondays to tune in and see my story or see what challenge I have every Monday. And that has something to do with mindfulness. And yeah, just like retraining your brain to be the better human that you can be. I really, really believe that everyone, when they become more mindful, they are a more productive member of society. They're happier. The frequency of the earth is at an all-time high, and that is at a love frequency. And I really, really think that everybody should even if they have, any hesitation, just try mindfulness somehow, whether it just be like saying a prayer before you eat, or, tuning into how to breathe better to somebody on YouTube or me on YouTube, so yeah, I just have this vision of the world to be more mindful. So that is kind of my spiel. If you're interested in having a body scan recording sent directly to your inbox, just go onto book.theerinedwards.com and I'll grab your email address in exchange for the body scan recording. So yeah, there's lots of stuff coming up in the near future. I also offer a mindfulness course. It's 3-week full intensive. You get 2 hours of coaching with me every week. So that is in the process right now. If anyone is interested, you can just DM me directly through Instagram. I do think we had some really great things come up on this chat today. And for everybody that's listening, there is help in case you do really need help. Remember that 911 is always an option, and if not, there's the Crisis Services Canada. That's really, really useful. crisisservicescanada.ca, or they have a phone number 1-833-456-4566, or you can even text START to their number, the 45645, and they offer some really great crisis services. So if you are ever in a bind, because we've all been there, don't forget your community and don't forget that there are services there to help you.
Yeah, good addition. That's right. And because just in case, because you never know who could be watching this and what kind of stuff they could be going through. So that's a good reminder. There's help out there no matter what you're going through.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Awesome.